Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Game Develop Repeat. This is a podcast where we talk about a game that I enjoy, what makes it special, and what we as game developers can learn from it. I am your host, Chris, a former music educator turned indie game developer, and today's episode is all about Dredge. In this episode, we're mostly discussing the idea of discovery. I also talk about my game's release stuff a little bit because I just got a Steam page up, and we're talking about kind of learning through games. It's part of the whole discovery thing. You'll see. We'll get into it. In fact, let's get to it right now. Several episodes I promised that I would cover Dredge, and I am finally getting around to it. This is a weird one for me to cover because I played this game in two big chunks. When it first came out, I played a good chunk of it, a good hefty bit, and then I stopped for a while because I got distracted by all these other amazing games. And then I jumped back into it and finished it more recently. I do recommend, if you're playing this game, go ahead and, if you can, play through the whole thing in kind of one gaming chunk, if that makes sense. So whatever your like period of time for playing a game is, like, I'd recommend not taking a big break from this game is essentially what I'm saying here. I think taking a big break from it made me get a little less out of it than I would have liked. I think it's a good game to immerse yourself in, and it's not that long, so it's not that hard to do that. Okay, let me explain what Dredge is very quickly before we dig deep. Dredge is a fishing game. It is a Lovecraftian horror fishing game. You know I love fishing games. Not really a big horror guy. But this particular game pulls it off in a way that makes me go, yeah, this is a nice aesthetic. This is good. This is executed well. There's a sense of discovery throughout the game. There is a sense of fear throughout the game. You kind of have to allocate your fishing time properly. Like, there are certain fish that only pop up at night, but when it's nighttime, you're more likely to go insane. There are fish that are bigger and smaller and fill up your inventory differently. It has a kind of a Tetris inventory system, kind of like a Diablo 2 old school thing where you have to pay attention to which way the objects are facing, and you can only carry so much at once and all that good stuff, which I find oddly compelling. I think maybe that's a nostalgia thing, but I love a good Tetris inventory system. I'm not sure why, but I do. It's got to be in the right place, though, you know? It's got to have some kind of purpose, and it does serve a purpose here. It serves the purpose of making you really think about what you want to take back and what you don't want to take back. How difficult is the game? It's not that difficult, to be honest. It's spooky. It's got a whole cool feel to it. It feels really scary, initially especially. I do think towards the end, it becomes much more a game about discovery than about any sort of challenge. There were like a couple major challenges, but I think as you go through it, it's more about like understanding what is going on than it is about like conquering difficulties. Let's talk about this understanding. Let's talk about this discovery. Throughout the game, you find new types of fish, you find like different versions of fish, and you have that compulsion to find all of the fish. I think that is a big part of this one. And then you also find interesting things out about the world, and you kind of have to piece together this narrative puzzle. You're going through it a little bit blindfolded, and you're going, what's going on here? Why is this like this? And that's why I recommend doing the game in one larger chunk. Because I took a big break from it, I got disconnected from the lore, and then I got really confused about what was going on. When I finished the game, I was like, what? Huh? So and it's not that the ending is particularly confusing. It's just that I was very detached from what was going on, and I wasn't very like emotionally invested in anything, and so on and so on. So it's all about this sense of discovering new fish, discovering new lore, learning about the world, understanding what is going on in here. That is, I think, what makes the game compelling. That and the overbearing sense of insignificance, maybe. Maybe that's the word for it. It's it's got that Lovecraftian thing where you are a small piece of a much bigger thing, and you're kind of going up against forces that you can't possibly comprehend. Um, it's interesting. It's got a cool throughout the entire game. There's this cool mystery going on, but it's not the kind of mystery that you have in a game that has a lot more like of a puzzle aspect to it, where you have to resolve the mystery in order to finish the game. In this game, you can kind of ignore the mystery if you want to, or you can explore a lot and uncover what's going on. So you could just go through this game and go, "Oh, I'm gonna fish, and these are some cool fish, and that's interesting," and just enjoy the like environmental aesthetic of it. Or you can go in and you can try to really understand the world. And I think that's one of the things that happens with a game that's about discovery is you can force the player to have to discover everything. But I think a really good game about discovery lets the player go through the game with blindfolds on. You know what? That's a broad statement. A certain type of game about discovery will let the player just not discover anything and finish the game anyway, and hopefully still have a good time in that process. I'm not going to say that that makes a good game. I'm just going to say that that is a way of approaching it, which I appreciate. What lessons can we take away from Dredge? I think that every game has discoveries in it. That's a lesson I want to take away from this. I'm not 100% confident about this concept, but I'm thinking through it, going through a whole bunch of different games in my mind, and I'm thinking, yeah, I can't think of a game that doesn't have a sense of discovery, that doesn't have something new around the corner, and that adds a lot of excitement to it. We can take obvious examples, right? We can jump into like Pokemon. Every new creature that you catch, every new thing that you encounter is a new discovery. Every evolution is a new discovery. Cool, great. What about a shooter? What about like a competitive shooter? Well, you're discovering how you can use your weapon against somebody else's weapon in certain situations. I think I've had this thought recently, and this might be a bit of a tangent, but I think it's important and I think it's connected to this. Are games just weird education? Like, are games. I've got to expand on this. Bear with me for a second. I think every game is about learning some skill and having fun in the process, or learning about some world, or learning about some history, or some people, or whatever, what have you. It seems to all be a method of learning something. And maybe this is just the type of game that I play, but I feel like every game, or maybe it's just like my mindset, but I feel like every game that I play is fun because I am learning something. I don't think there's a game I play where I'm not learning anything that I like really enjoy. And I think that once a game gets old, it's because it's no longer got any kind of interesting novelty or skill to develop. And I think I didn't realize this concept until like the past couple weeks when I started going, wait, why am I actually in what really at its core makes me enjoy playing games? And what is it about my game that has some enjoyment behind it? Like what actually makes games fun? I was thinking about it, and it's like skill development, right? I think it's skill development in some games, and then in other games it's discovery, which is another form of learning. I think we're just constantly learning, right? I think I think games are ultimately about learning, and that's not to say that like educational games are the peak of gaming. That is not that's not my opinion. Not that you can't make a great educational game, but you get what I'm saying. I think it's like learning about these new foreign worlds, learning about all sorts of interesting, strange things that may not even exist, and you're doing it in a like no stakes environment, right? It has no real consequences on your day to day life if you learn this thing poorly or if you learn it really well. It's interesting to me. Um, Having said that, let's just circle back a little bit to Dredge specifically. The lessons I'm taking away are about discovering new things and a sense of mystery and suspense. I'm not big on mystery. I like resolution. I like closing that circle. I like understanding what is going on as soon as possible, and I like clear, clean endings. Instinctively, I push against that element of myself. I like to try to kind of fight myself on those things and learn to like the things that I don't instinctively move towards. But I think Dredge shows me how important some suspense is, how important maybe even a little bit of confusion is, how it can pique your curiosity to not know what is going on, how interesting it can be to have so much uncertainty behind the gameplay. Not the gameplay itself, sorry. The story going on. I mean, uncertainty in gameplay is maybe not usually that good. You want your player to know what to do in terms of like controlling the game and so on and so on. Let's try to think of a game that doesn't have any discoveries. Maybe something like Pong. Maybe if we go really simple, maybe like I was gonna say like maybe an Angry Bird game, but they've got every game has like a different format of fort that you were knocking down, new types of birds, all this stuff. You're always learning new stuff there. You're kind of figuring out the support structures of the stuff you're knocking down. Pong, you're kind of discovering what your opponent is doing. I feel like discovery is also a broad enough word that I can just make it work anywhere. But I can't, off the top of my head, think of a game that has no sense of discovery in it. Um, and so I think it's good to know where your discoveries lie in your game, or what might be interpreted as a discovery. And not necessarily as a thing that we like intentionally mess with or manipulate or whatever. I mean, that can be good, but just knowing where that is in your game, I feel like can help you design a little bit and balance things and go, oh, is there a little too much mystery here? Is there a little too much to uncover? Is it a little are my players going to be too in the dark right now? Is the sense of discovery about what button to press to attack? Because I should probably just go ahead and tell them what button to press, and then they can pay attention to what I want them to be discovering, which is whether or not there's a big monster around the corner, right? Yeah. I think I think that's all I have to say about the lessons I've learned from this game. I'm sure there's way more, but there's a lot that I can't talk about without spoiling things. So I'm not going to go into those things, but there's a lot to learn about like narrative design and like building a world through lore and like interesting angles of character development and all that stuff. But we're not going to get into that because it's too spoilery. And this is a game that should be played without spoilers as much as possible. It is quite good. I do recommend it. Let's move on to the final chunk of this podcast. Oh, wait. I'm mistaken. I'm sorry. This is still the develop section. I need to talk about what's going on with Soot. I made my Steam page. I got my Steam page up. I figured out a rough release date. It's going to be end of this month, end of October. Game is coming out. SUT. Feel free to look it up. There's my little self promo. I've also done some miscellaneous fixes. I'm still doing some little tiny fixes. I've played through the game. I got 5 more levels to beat. Some of the levels are hard, and I was playing them, and I was just like, oh man, I can't beat this whole game in one session. I need to like give myself some time to digest and come back to these last 5 levels because they're a little tough. I might have to make difficulty adjustments. I don't think so, though. I think they're in a pretty good place. I'm just very bad at platformers. I'm doing some final decisions on the game. I am letting go of things that I really would like to do, but I know that I can't because of my timeline. There are things that are little imperfections, right? Little tiny things that I go, oh, I'd like to add that, but I'm not going to be able to. This is one of the reasons why I'm pricing the game so low, is because I want it to be a fair price, knowing that I'm accepting certain imperfections. And these are not huge things. Like the game has a menu, the game has audio controls, the game has a level select menu, the game has save data. Like it has all the basic functionality that you would expect, which is great. And it has 50 levels. Cool, perfect, wonderful. But the visuals can get a little bit samey, and I would love to fix that. I would love to change that. I would love to have the visuals have a nice variety. I'd like to have a whole bunch of different tile maps. I'd like to do all these cool things. But I got to finish the game, and I got to start learning a new engine. And I know that even if I update the visuals a ton, it's not like it's going to... One, I'm not going to learn that much from it that I can carry forward. And then two, it's not going to have a huge impact on the reception of the game for the people that play it. I mean, it'll definitely do something, but I just can't justify it. And then one thing I am going to do is I'm going to add more songs, because I do think that that's driving me crazy more than the visual sameness is. The visual sameness can be a little bit annoying. The auditory looping, like only having a certain number of songs. Right now it's got like 5-6 songs. It's driving me nuts. It has to have more songs. So I am going to put more songs in, and that's very, very easy to do as far as implementing them into the game. It is drag and drop, easy peasy with the way that I've got it set up. That is fine. But I do have to compose the songs, so fair enough, fine. I know how to do that. That's no biggie. I can do that before release. That's everything I have to say about Soot. Do look it up on Steam, give it a wish list. I'm going to add a link to it in the description here. That's as much self-promo as I'm comfortable doing. Let's move on to the final chunk of this podcast. It's going to be a short section today. I've only got 2 questions. 1, what am I discovering through this project? And 2, what do players discover while playing my game? I'm particularly invested in the first question, what am I discovering through this project? Because I think it helps us move towards future projects and learn about our own process and learn about what kind of games we like making. And I think there's got to be something for the creator in every game that we make, right? I think there's got to be something that we are getting out of it. It's not simply like some self-sacrifice thing. It's not just for money. It's something that we are learning. Oh, I didn't answer them. What am I discovering through this project? I'm discovering whether or not I like making games, and I do. And I'm also discovering a little bit about every aspect of game design and game development. I'm discovering which parts I like, which parts I don't like. I'm discovering which parts are difficult. I'm discovering how I work. I'm discovering so much that I cannot list everything that I'm discovering. It's a nice process. It's overwhelming, but it is beautiful and fascinating and interesting and compelling, and I love it. And then what do players discover while playing the game? They discover the level. I have like a shroud thing going on, so you don't know what's around the next corner, right? There's a couple gameplay mechanics that you discover, but I kind of set it up so that you are forced into discovering them quite quickly and very directly, and so that you can't really miss them. But the main discovery comes from your vision radius, and then you're discovering how to do certain things, like stick to a wall, jump, and then attack an enemy, and then get back on that same wall, or time your jump just right so that you can stick to a wall, wait for the enemy to fire, jump over them, land on the other side, and then attack them and push them into some lava, right? So you're discovering some environmental gameplay. You're getting to use your environment and understand your environment to do things at the right, to do things from the right place, and to conquer your enemies using your environment, I guess is how I would phrase it. And the tip for this week is that nothing is ever perfect. You're never perfect. Your game is never perfect. Your partner is never perfect. The meal you're eating, sometimes a meal seems perfect. But my point is, nothing's ever perfect, right? Like, so don't get stuck with perfect. Don't chase perfect. Sometimes you got to finish. Sometimes you got to shoot for good, and think of every AAA game you played with millions of dollars behind it and huge teams of people doing everything they possibly can to make the best possible product. It's not perfect, It's just what it is. And what we do is we make the best thing we can, and sometimes you got to look at it and go, yeah, that's this project for this time in my life. That's where it's going to finish. That's where we're going to wrap it. The end. And I don't think, this is a weird note, but I don't think I would ever make this podcast if I was still focused on perfect. A big element of this podcast is to show the process a lot. And I don't know if it's a good move to be out here saying, hey, here's my game. It's imperfect and I know it, right? I don't think that's a good marketing move, right? But I do think it's good for developers and even for gamers and for the gaming culture to understand this whole picture and to see behind the scenes. I don't know. I mean, obviously this podcast is never going to be perfect. Nothing I create is ever going to be perfect, but I want to share it anyway. And I guess that's the other half of this tip. Nothing's ever perfect, but you got to do it anyway. That's everything I have for you this week. Have a good week. Get out there. Make some stuff. Have fun with it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.